The Creative Psychotherapist is the official podcast of the Creative Clinicians Corner, a practice-building resource for creative psychotherapists. TCP Podcast is the cast for creative, expressive, and experiential-focused psychotherapists curious to learn how to design, build, and scale a thriving private practice. Your host, Reina Lombardi, interviews successful therapists about the tools and strategies they have used to develop creative-focused practices. They also talk about the products, services, and side hustles they have developed using their knowledge and creativity to enhance their therapy practices, make a greater impact in their communities, and diversify their income streams. Welcome. Now here's your host, Reina Lombardi.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to episode 2 of the Creative Psychotherapist podcast. I'm your host, Reina Lombardi, and today we're going to be talking about finances in business and how do you come up with determining what your fee is and what your worth and value is as a therapist. Sometimes this is a very difficult topic to discuss, and it can be very challenging for people to really make a business-based decision and not an emotional-based decision. I think so many of us go to school with a desire to really help people, and sometimes it feels uncomfortable to charge to provide the services and the support that we do. And other ways where we learn things like, you didn't get in this for the money, which I know I've heard many times throughout my career, going all the way back to grad school. And I really encourage everybody that I work with and that I supervise to consider that. Are you sure that you didn't go into this for the money? This is an occupation. It is a business. It is how you take care of yourself, how you take care of your family. And I really don't know too many other professions where that rhetoric would be thrown around so easily. Doctors are in a profession of providing life-saving treatment to individuals, and yet that's probably not something that is said to them, or at least it's not something that has been internalized within the system the way it is with mental health providers. And so I think it's unhelpful to us in that most people who are going into private practice are leaving a nonprofit job or perhaps a community behavioral health job, working at an agency where they're probably not getting paid a fair living wage, which is commensurate with their education and the amount of additional learning and training, supervision, etc., that's required in order to be licensed to practice and provide care for clients. And so on the other end of the spectrum, I'm not saying that we should be charging exorbitant prices that people can't afford and making mental health inaccessible due to its costs. But I do encourage people to really contemplate, how much is it that you need to make in order to live a thriving life, in order for you to thrive, in order for you to pay for your own health insurance and make sure that you're receiving proper medical care yourself, in order for you to be able to save for retirement and not have any insecurities about what you're going to do as you reach the end of your career, and how you're going to take care of your kids. Over the years, I've met single moms who are in the profession and they're having to apply for assistance because the salary that they made as a mental health practitioner was not sufficient to cover their family's needs. And I don't think that's appropriate, considering how long and hard and how much people invest in the knowledge and skills that are necessary in order to really do good work with people. And so I really believe it's important for us to do an inventory of our personal finances and look at our personal finances. If you have a lot of debts, are you able to reconcile some of those? Are you able to consolidate some of those debts and really work towards aggressively paying them off before you go into practice? That would put you at a great advantage. But if not, okay, let's look at and itemize everything in your personal expenses as they are now. And like I said, what you're making now is probably less than what may be desired or what is necessary to really cover the costs of what you need to thrive. That might be uh, additional, you might need to earn additional money in order to, say, be part of a specialized yoga gym. That might be something that is part of your self-care and really helps you take care of yourself. But in your former job, you might not have been able to afford that because of the salary. And so if you're going into private practice, you really want to look into what are those additional expenses that you'd like to have covered in addition to what your expenses are already. And then once you get an itemized version, you really want to look at all the things that you spend on throughout the year, not just your monthly expenses, because there's going to be other additional expenses that come up throughout the year. And you're going to want to break those down by month. So if it's a once a year payment, how much does that look like if you divided it by 12? What would be that amount that you need to make each month in order to cover that when it comes up? How much do you want to be contributing to savings? How much do you want to be or need to be contributing to retirement in order to retire at the age that you're looking to retire by? All of those things need to be allocated in that expense. And then you're going to want to look at putting together an itemized list of what are the expected business expenses. If you're not in business yet, um, that would be what your monthly lease would be. That would be your liability insurance. Um, that would be things like electric or internet, shredding service, your fax. If you're using technology to facilitate, perhaps you do online supervision or telehealth services with clients, then you're going to want to factor the cost of your uh, HIPAA compliant video software, and that can be expensive. And if you're using an electronic health record, that might not be something you do when you first start out because it could be a way that you could save and not have that expense just starting out. Or you may decide, no, I want to start using that from the beginning. And so it'll be worth the expense that I don't have to then go back and upload all of the files and scan in all the files that I have once I'm ready to make that transition. It would also be things like going to trainings and conferences in your job in a community setting. They may have covered some of those costs for you if you're in private practice, and you're going to have to support that yourself. So, what does that look like? You also need to think about the taxes, and that would be not just your federal taxes, but if you're in a state that has state income taxes, if you have a brick and mortar um, office, you may also need to pay municipality taxes. I know for me, in the city and county where I'm at, I have to pay for both, and it runs me close to $500 a year just for the taxes to operate a business in the community. And then you're going to want to include all the different types of insurances, all your professional liability insurance. If you have life insurance, which I recommend people have life insurance, to be able to pay out their the person that they have assigned the business will to. So everybody who's in practice ethically should have a business will, and that would give, if something happened to you as the practitioner, you were severely injured and unable to maintain your business, or in an unforeseen uh, death, then this would be the person that would take over and close down your business. And so it's a lot of work, all of the things that are needed um, to close down a mental health practice, because we're dealing with people's records and they're going to have to reach out to them and, you know, manage everything until it's closed down and sorted out. So a life insurance policy would be a way that if something did happen to you, that they could be paid and compensated for taking on that responsibility, because it really is a big one. Um, and then your professional dues and licensing, uh, finances that go towards that. So, what does it take to maintain your credentials? Do you have any student loan payments? Those kinds of things. So, you'll also want to take into account what you're going to budget for marketing. And as you first start, you're going to need to allocate at least $1,000 towards getting things like signage. Good signage on a brick and mortar business can make a huge difference. And especially if you're a creative based practice, you really want to take advantage of being able to put that out there, because if people see something like dance therapy or music therapy or play therapy, that might be enough to get them to say, oh, I should look that up and check out, find out what's going on there. And that can happen just from signage. I've had a lot of people contact me just from having the signage. And then you're going to want to have, nice cards made and any other paper material. Maybe those are rack cards or trifolds to pass out and provide to other practitioners in the areas and your professional network. And then any giveaways that you might do, like pens with your business name and phone number or website on it, that you could have to give away if you went to a community marketing event. And then anything that you're wanting to use for advertisement. So a lot of practices are using things like Facebook ads or Instagram ads or Google AdWords to market their business. And that takes a substantial financial investment. If you did go into that to market your practice, I suggest finding a professional that specializes in that work, because it can get pretty complicated pretty quickly and you can end up losing a lot of money if you don't know what you're doing. And so part of that budget might not just be for what it costs to run the ads, but what it costs to pay an expert to really design an ad that's going to give a return on the investment. And then other networking events that you might want to do in your community. And then as you build your practice, you're probably going to need some help. And so you might have to add things to your budget, like having a virtual assistant or an in person office assistant, a medical biller, maybe a graphic designer. That's probably going to be part of your upfront costs, unless you're really good at that and you've designed your own logo and such, which you can do too. I did that for my practice. I designed it myself using some software, which was really inexpensive to do. And that saved me when I was first starting, and I tried to really minimize the expenses then. So after you have your list of your personal expenses and practice expenses, you're going to add them all up. And again, you're really going to look to divide it out by monthly expenses. So if something's by the year or something's quarterly, you're going to want to turn it into a monthly fee, just so that you can get an idea, a rough estimate of how much your business actually needs to be bringing in per month. Because your salary is going to go to covering your personal expenses. And then all of the other money that comes into the business has to pay for operating the business itself. And once you have those, then you can start making a list of what types of services you're going to be providing each week, what the fee for that service is going to be, and how many clients a week are going to be served. And then you can determine the amount of income that that service at that fee is going to bring in each week. Which then we can look at a monthly service type. So, for example, perhaps part of your practice is hosting a case consultation group with other creative therapists, and that's something that brings a little bit of income each month. So, you want to list that monthly income. And then looking at things that you do once a quarter or things that you might do annually. So an example might be, in addition to providing individual and group therapy, I provide supervision, individual supervision, and I provide group supervision. Group supervision isn't weekly, it's every other week generally. Sometimes it might only be once a month. So the way I calculate that out is going to be a little different than it's something that an individual session that I provide each week. But I want to look at every service that I'm providing. An annual service that I provide would be training. So I do continuing education training within my practice. And so different continuing education trainings are going to be listed once a year, and I'm going to calculate that fee, and then I'm going to again divide it up so I get a monthly total, and then I can then further divide it down by a weekly totals. But what I really want to get at is how many weeks I'm going to be working per year. So, how many weeks you work per year, you get to decide in practice. I really suggest that you don't overstretch yourself. You're going to need time to work on administrative tasks in addition to all the work that you do as a therapist providing therapy services. And so, what's your optimal time that you work per week? So how many face-to-face client hours are you going to be working per week? And then how many hours are you going to dedicate to additional administrative tasks? You really want to look at that so that you can create a successful business where you're not burning out. Sometimes I think it's easy when we're transitioning from a community behavior based model to kind of go right back into that model in our practice, and that can really lead to burnout really quickly. Um, so, how much time do you need? And that's probably going to depend on the population of clients that you're serving. So, what maybe you have several different types of clients that you serve to create a balance so you don't overdo it in a given day. Um, and then the different fees are going to be different because if you're taking fees from insurance, insurance pays different than if you're collecting from private pay. And then you may also want to look at offering sliding scale services. If that's something that you want to do, you can calculate that into the fee calculator and kind of play with the numbers. And you can add in even a no-show or cancellation into this calculation. And I have a spreadsheet that is available for download. And we'll talk about that at the end, where you can plug in all of this information. And then based on the numbers that you plug in, you can figure out how much you need to charge for the services and how much you need to work. So I like to calculate a profit right off the top. So I'm going to multiply my total minimum net income. That's the minimum income that I need in order to pay my personal expenses and all of my practice expenses. And I'm going to multiply that by the amount or desired target percentage that I want to earn for a profit. And that way, that's getting factored in from the beginning. And I I did not always do this. This is something that I only recently learned from listening to other podcasters who had recommended this really amazing book called Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. And if you are starting a practice, I highly recommend that you read that first. It'll give you some really, really sound advice on how to manage your finances so that you can be successful. Because if you can't pay your bills, you can't serve your clients. And so if we want to stay open, we have to make sure that we're creating a financially viable business for ourselves. And so in the Practice First model, the idea is that you're paying yourself first. You're paying yourself and setting aside profit first before paying out all your bills. And this way, if you're already thinking about it in terms of how you're going to create your fees and what you need to earn, if you're calculating your percentage first, then you're making sure that you're going to earn a profit, which is important if later on down the line you decide, you know what, I built a practice, it's doing really well, but I'm ready to do something else and I want to sell it. So if you have a profitable practice and it's well documented in your accounting that it's making a profit, then the valuation of your business is going to be more valued than one that isn't bringing in a profit and maybe isn't netting the amount that it needs. And so what you're going to want to do is you're going to multiply your monthly netted income with the percent for profit by 12. And that's going to be your annual needed income. And then from that number, you're going to divide it by the number of weeks you plan to provide face-to-face services per year. So the number of weeks that you are going to be doing fee for service work per year. And that's going to be your weekly needed income. So, for example, I think it's important to take off a fair amount of time. I don't feel like 2 weeks is sufficient, which is pretty standard in the corporate world, 2 weeks. And then as you're vested with a company, they'll give you a little bit more. But I know for me, I calculate my number from 40 weeks, and that means that there's 12 weeks off per year. Now, Those 12 weeks don't necessarily mean that I'm on vacation for those 12 weeks, but those are 12 weeks that I'm not providing face-to-face services. And so some of them may be designated for vacation. Some of them are going to be designated for trainings and conferences that require me to be out of the office. And then some of them are going to be dedicated to specific long-term admin projects where I need really focused time, and I can't do that while I'm seeing clients. So I'll set aside that time specifically for those. And then you can look at adjusting based on what your goals and needs are. So, for example, if your weeks per year are more than that, that's okay. You might start out with more than that. I certainly started out with more than that, and I've just worked it down over the years that I've been doing private practice. But I will say that as you're looking at how do I meet my income, it's always easier to cut expenses than it is to raise fees. You do want to be able to create a fee that's based on your actual expenses and not necessarily asking somebody else what they charge. I've met people that charge $25 an hour to provide therapy services, and I've met people that charge $225 an hour for therapy services. And so I really think it's important that we figure out what is the price that we need and not go by what somebody else is doing. At any rate, if you're interested in learning more about the fee calculator that I created, it's an Excel spreadsheet, or it's a Google spreadsheet, and it has everything very, very meticulously organized as to what you need to do in order to calculate the fees. I'd be happy to send that to you. All you need to do is go to the creativeclinicianscorner.com/fee, FEE -calculator, and it's available for a free download. Anyway, if you have any questions, comments, or are interested in other specific topics, please feel free to write me at creativeclinician@gmail.com, and we'll start putting together a list of topics that people would like to hear. And I hope you found this information helpful as you think about how you're going to structure your fees for practicing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Creative Psychotherapist. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For show notes, downloads, and additional resources, head over to the website at www.creativeclinicianscorner.com.